So, hello students. Hope you all are doing good. So, I'm starting with the new lecture, non-probability sampling. So, we already done with probability sampling. So, this is about non-probability sampling. So, firstly, let us understand what do you mean by sampling. So, measuring a small portion of something and then making a general statement about the whole thing. That is taking a very small thing, a very small amount of anything which is actually representing the whole population, that is known as sampling, and which is actually depicting the population. So it is the process of selecting a number of units for the study in such a way that the units represent the larger group from which they are selecting. So, sampling is actually drawing a certain set of respondents from the whole population. So, generally, a researcher takes a small portion of the population for study, which is referred to as sample, and the process of selecting the sample is known as sampling. So, sampling is essential because it saves time, it saves your money. When the research is destructive in nature, it minimizes the destruction and also it broadens the scope of your study. Sometimes it happens we are not accessible to the whole population, so that in that case it is beneficial to collect sample. If we talk about census is like collecting the data from whole population from but it is not a practical method of gathering information in many situations because of various constraints such as of time, cost, etc. So, in other words, we can say that sampling is the only practical situation in certain situations. So, general types of sampling, probability sampling and non probability sampling. We can name them also random sampling and non random sampling accordingly or respectively. Probability sampling is also known as random sampling. Non probability sampling is also known as non random sampling. So, probability sampling is that sampling where the respondent gets equal chances of being selection. So, it is the chance factor comes into play in the case of random sampling, and we have done in very detail in our probability sampling technique. So, now we will move to the non probability sampling. Non probability sampling is where there is an unequal chance of being included in the sample. It is unlike random sampling or probability sampling where we are giving the equal chance of selection. Here chance factor doesn't come into account, and we are there is unequal chance of being included in the sample. So, non random or non probability sampling refers to the sampling process in which samples are to be selected for specific purpose with the predetermined basis of selection. So, here it is written predetermined that you know about it. You know from how, where to collect data and why to collect data. It's clear in both the cases, but from where to collect the data, that is your bias is coming within, that comes under non-random sampling techniques. So there are different kinds of non-probability sampling. We'll do one by one. Here the sample is not a proportion of the population, as there is no system of selecting the sample. It depends on the situation, it depends on the researcher bias, it depends on anything. So no assurance is given that each item has chance of being included as sample, right? So there is one assumption that there is an even distribution of characteristics within the population, so believing that any sample would be representative. So after reading all the cases, we can say it that it is not as good as probability sampling, because in probability sampling error would get reduced and there is no chances of biasness. So come to the types of non probability sampling. There are four types of non probability sampling: judgment or purposive or deliberate sampling, convenience sampling, quota sampling, and snowball sampling. So, come to the judgment or purposive or deliberate. Now you can have a look at their names. Judgment, purposive or deliberate, that is as per the researcher's bias, as per the researcher judgment. So in this method, the sample selection is purely based on the judgment of the investigator or researcher. This is because the researcher may lack information regarding the population from which he has to collect the sample. So that is why they use their judgment. In some cases, researchers believe that they will able to select a more representative sample by using their judgment. So which is actually time and cost efficient and is more accurate than random sampling. But there are certain limitation also of this sample we'll do afterwards. So in this method of sampling, the choice of sample item depends primarily on the judgment of the researcher. So researcher determines and includes those items in the sample which he thinks are the most typical of the universe with regard to the characteristic of research project. For example, suppose 100 boys are to be selected from a college with 1000 boys, right? So population is your 1000 and you have to collect a sample of 100 boys. So if nothing is known about the students in the college, then the investigator visit the college and choose the first 100 boys he meets. So that is also the judgment of the researcher. Or he may select 100 boys all belonging to third year, second year, or 25 boys from the commerce course, 25 from the science, arts, etc. So all the things, hence only the sample size is known. We know that 100 boys are to be selected, but we don't know from where it is to be selected. So here only the sample size is known and investigator uses his discretion and select the sample. No, the use of judgment sampling is justified by the following premises. If there are a small number of sampling, it would be better to use judgment. But if it is in the large number, so the bias from the researchers and may be very high. So this is not a good method in that case. So if there are judgment sampling enables inclusion of important units. Judgment stratification of population helps in obtaining a representative sample in case research study wants to look into unknown traits of the population. It is also a practical method to arrive at some solution to everyday business problems. So, limitations are the judgment sampling involves a risk that researcher may establish conclusions by including those items in the sample which conform to his preconceived ideas. That is already, preconceived ideas. You are applying your preconception. You have already decided that you have to choose this sample and you will come at this result. So it is very biased and not good in this case. So there is no objective way of evaluating the reliability of sample results. So then we come to the next thing, next sampling method, convenience sampling. So convenience sampling is commonly known as unsystematic, accidental, or opportunity sampling. So, convenience sampling is also known as unsystematic, accidental, or opportunistic sampling. So, convenience, as the name suggests, it is about the convenience of investigator. In this method, the choice of sample depends on the judgment of researcher also. Along with the judgment, here it is more focused on the convenience of researcher. For example, if we say a marketing research firm wants to serve 2000 consumers or for any product, so it will be more convenient for him for the company to interview 2000 customers who come to their mall and look friendly. But if researcher wants to survey 1000 customers door to door in particular locality, samples can be selected from the houses which are nearby. Houses are actually, people are responsive and friendly. Houses which are in the first floor of an apartment, anything which is convenient to you, that is the basis of this sampling method. So a type of non probability sampling which involves a sample being drawn from that part of the population which is close to your hand and that is readily available and convenient. Here, one more thing is given, one more example is given. Suppose 100 car owners are to be selected. Then we may collect from the RTO's office the list of car owners and then make a selection of 100 from that to form the sample. So, a convenience sampling may be used in the following cases when the very first is the universe is not well defined. You don't know from which population you have to collect your data. When sampling unit is not clear, you don't know about your sampling unit. Then, when complete list of sources not available, then you choose convenience sampling as your sampling technique. For example, you can have a look at this figure. So this is the set of population on the left hand side, and you have collected some data. You collected some data, and you can see at the bottom, you can collected the data from the bottom. So you don't know how many of the red respondents come, or green, or blue, or purple, or pink, or gray. There is no there is no nothing like that equal selection of all participants. It is very judgmental, and because we have done it as per our convenience, that is nearby your house, or the customers coming to your mall daily, or etc, anything. Or suppose you are doing some study on the students, then you collect data from your classmates. So that is the also one method of convenience sampling. Okay. The third one is quota sampling. That is very important method, quota sampling. So you have always heard about it, that SC quota, BC quota, or OBC quota. So that is also a quota method. So in this method, the sample size is determined first, and then quota is fixed for various categories of population. So it is similar to the stratified random sampling, but the stratified random sampling is based on randomly selecting units from the stratum, whereas quota sampling is based on non-random sampling of, to gather data from one stratum. So that is the major difference. Suppose normally such a method does not ensure representativeness of the population. Suppose we want to select 100 students, then we might say that the sample should be according to the quota given below. 100 students. Out of the 100, boys should be 50%, girls should be 50%. That is, you have selected the data, your sample size first, and then quota is fixed. That is, out of the 100, 50% are boys and 50% are girls. Similarly, you can also set the quota like among the boys, 20% college students, 40%, 40% plus 2 students, 30% high school students, 10% elementary school students, anything. So a different or the same quota may be fixed for the girls. So I will take one more example. Suppose we a researcher want to select a sample of 1,000 from a population of 50,000. So this population contains 10,000 males and 40,000 females. That is as per the discretion of the researcher. The researcher wants to apply quota sampling, and he assigns a quota in the sample according to the population proportion. So in a population of 1,000 people, suppose the researcher will select 200 males and 800 females as per the population proportion. So I think you are now clear on the quota sampling. That is, you select the sample size first, then go by the quota is fixed for the various categories of population. Again, I repeat one example. Suppose 1,000 people has to be selected from the 10,000. Suppose, and that 1,000 people consists of 200 males and 800 females. That is your quota sampling. So it is a useful technique. Quota sampling is very useful technique when there are cost and time constraints. So it reduces cost of preparing sample and fieldwork. since ultimate units can be selected so that they are close together. It also introduces stratification effect. Stratification effect means you are applying some random things also to it, that you are not going by convenience or judgment, you have applied some technique to it, you have stratified the population. So demerits of quota sampling. Okay, firstly, go by one more example. For example, a researcher wants to stratify the population of different scooter owners in a city. So I'm again telling, a researcher wants to stratify the population of different scooter owners in a city. However, he finds it difficult to obtain a list of Bajaj scooter owners. In this case, through quota sampling, researcher can conduct interviews of all the scooter owners and cast out non-scooter owners until the quota of Bajaj scooter owners is filled. So that is also one good example of quota sampling. So demerits are, it introduce bias of investigator. Uh, okay, we can't underestimate that the static, we are not going by some method, we are still doing non-random sampling. So random sampling is involved not involved at any stage. The errors of the method cannot be estimated by statistical procedures. This is the most commonly used in marketing survey and election polls. The last one is snowball sampling. It's a very interesting type of sampling. So it refers to identifying someone who meets the criteria for inclusion in the study. So it is actually based on the referrals from the initial respondents. One by one, the respondent tells about details about the other respondent whose profile will fit into the study. Through